Hey, you're listening to episode 88 on the Air Hug Community Podcast. Hello there and welcome or welcome back. If you are new here, this is the Air Hug Community Podcast and I am your host, Judy Arizosa. I am a midlife lady who is someone who loves to share stories from myself and special guests that reflect on just how midlife really goes, not how we think it should go. We talk about the good, the bad, the messy, the ugly, the wonderful, all the emotions. And this is a place where we actually can grow from our experiences. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Okay, so I got to tell you, before we start this episode, I want to give you a little bit of background because I actually really hate labels. Here's a great example of why I hate labels. When I was in school, I don't remember if I was in junior high or high school, but we had this substitute teacher in Spanish class. I think it was Spanish. I can't remember now. But the substitute teacher called me a half-wit because I talked too much. And that really pissed me off. First of all, I didn't know what that was. And then when she told me, I was even more mad. And I'm like, you don't even know me. You could have just said I talk too much. So I just really despise people being pigeonholed into labels. But there is this term that describes this phenomenon so well that I just have to not call it a label, but I want to talk about it today and give you a little food for thought, and I'm going to give you my opinion on it. So the term is called being an active couch potato. Now, I'm sure by now everyone knows what a couch potato is, right? You've heard couch potato. I've heard couch potato. It conjures up images to me. I have an image in my mind of a person sitting on a couch all day long eating potato chips and not really doing much of anything else. So, but what is an active couch potato? Well, first of all, I just want to tell you, I did not invent this term. This term first appeared in a reference in the Australian Journal for Diabetes, Australian Diabetes, Obesity, and Lifestyle Journal in 2008. And what it means is it's a person who meets the public health requirements for being physically active, and I'll define that in a minute, and who is also sedentary for most of the day. So the public health requirements for being physically active include having 30 minutes of physical activity on most days of the week. So not non-exercise activity, but exercise, okay? So, and that's pretty universal. That meets the 150 minutes, right, that we talk about. I think the American Heart Association talks about getting in 150 minutes of active exercise per week. So an active couch potato is someone who actually meets those requirements, but has several hours of inactivity the rest of the day, which means they might get up, go to work out in the morning, and then maybe go to a desk job, come home, maybe make dinner, and then sit down the rest of the night. So technically, they are still a couch potato. They're an active couch potato. So think about this. You can have perfect attendance and participation in your program of choice, but if you remain sedentary for most of the day, you're actually negating your efforts in the gym. Yikes. And I really think this is important because so many people feel like, I went to work out, so it must be okay. I went to work out. This can go both ways. I went to work out, so I deserve to sit the rest of the day, or I don't have to worry about being active the rest of the day. And then it kind of compounds after a while, and people don't understand why putting in the blood, sweat, and tears, hopefully not tears, and hopefully not blood in the gym doesn't add up to much. right? So I feel like it's my responsibility as a professional fitness coach, a trainer, and nutritionist to make sure that people who trust me are active throughout their days and hours beyond the session. And this includes cardio. So let's say someone is, I'm going to take the midlife example. Like a great thing would be, to train with a trainer or with some established program for 2 to 3 days a week. That would be reasonable, right? By the way, the average amount of time that people spend with a trainer, I don't know where the statistic was from, but I heard it is 1.7 hours per week, 1.7 sessions per week. But really, I mean, the ideal would be 3. Some people get 2, some people get 4, some people get 1, some people get less than 1. But anyways, regardless, if you're getting in that work, but you're sitting the rest of the day, it's not, you're negating the effort. And if you're sitting the rest of the week on the days that you're not actively in the gym, then you're really negating the efforts. You may have heard this statement before, but sitting is the new smoking. So that's not really a label, but it's kind of a phrase. And I really like that phrase because people it's so easy. We don't have to work for our food. We don't have to, most of us are not physically working for a living. Now there's plenty of people who are, but I think by and large, people who maybe think for a living, work from home, or don't do manual labor. If you're not a mailman or you're not actively lifting things in a factory, for instance, or whatever, it's very easy to be sedentary. And so one of the things that you can do is the quick 10-minute cardio. So I'd love to talk about how to do cardio. So there's different ways to do cardio. There are cardio zones, which you want to hit and aim for. But there's also different ways, different types of cardio that are really that we all need to do. And I like to break it up over the course of a week. So, and this is just to improve our health and longevity, and there are different reasons for each. So there's the zone 1 cardio. I like to call it the zone 1 cardio. And I'm just going to go as we go along. And those are the 10 minutes of continuous motion every day, no maximum amount, but at least one time a day. You do 10 minutes of continuous. Now, it doesn't mean you get out of your car, you walk into the grocery store, the post office, you do what you're going to do. You walk out and you walk out of your car. It's 10 minutes of uninterrupted movement. So I think for a lot of us, we're not getting that and we don't even think about it. But really, maybe you're walking your dog. Hopefully your dog's not stopping too often to poop, and you can get at least 10 minutes in. That's not your longer cardio. That's just your zone 1 cardio. And it's a great thing. It just helps. It's very, very light effort. And it can actually help with recovery from your previous workouts that you get during the week. So that's zone 1. Zone 2 is more of a lighter workout, but not very light, and it actually helps to build endurance. And I would like to go back and say that you're not going to really measure your heart rate for zone 1, but it's like 50 to 60% of your max heart rate. So, and we'll talk about max heart rate a little bit later. There's different ways that you can calculate it, but we'll talk about that later. Zone 2 is what people will often call low impact steady state exercise, or low impact steady state LISS cardio. And this is funny because this is an excellent form of cardio, and it should last 30 minutes. It can last more, and it should be 3 to 4 times a week. The problem is where people get too excited or they get bored. This is boring. There's no doubt about it. And we want to keep our heart rate in the 60 to 70% of max heart rate zone. And to keep it there is sometimes people think it's too easy. But the hard part is actually keeping it in that heart rate zone and not going over it. Then there's moderate, zone 3, where you're working in 70 to 80% and you're working to develop aerobic capacity, and this is moderate effort. You can do that a few times a week. And then there's stage 4, where you're working at 80 to 90%, and that's doggone hard. And that's where you're working to develop anaerobic capacity. The difference between aerobic and anaerobic is aerobic work requires use of oxygen, and anaerobic work basically does not use oxygen because it's so strenuous that you have to rely on other energy systems, and it's very short-lived and unsustainable for long periods of time. There is a 5th zone, which for the average Jane is not really necessary. That is really 90 to 100% of your maximal heart rate, and that is for elite athletes and who need to train speed and power. So we're not going to worry about that. But zone 1, well, first of all, let's talk about max heart rate. I will say that max heart rate, you can Google how to calculate max heart rate. The most widely accepted and easy method is 220 minus age. Now I'm going to put a little asterisk with that because for a lot of people, especially active older adults, and so I know that a lot of our audience here are midlife people and active. So for me, that doesn't work because I happen to know, I actually tested my max heart rate with a sprint test a few years ago, and have also kept up my aerobic capacity and anaerobic and strength training. So I'm reasonably sure it hasn't changed much. But my max heart rate is much, much higher than 220 minus my age. And so I did a little digging, and you can actually Google, and I might put it in the show notes, actually. I'm not going to go through it here, but there's a couple formulas that you can use if you suspect that your max heart rate is higher than that. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But zone 1, those 10-minute leisure walks, you want to do those every day. And you can do them more than once a day. It's a wonderful thing. And I'll tell you, like, I consider myself an active person, but I can get to points where I'll sit for a while. And I do have to remind myself. On most days, it's not a problem, but every now and then, you know, I might get on a Sunday and I'm like, I think I need to, I'll just go outside and I'll set the timer for 5 minutes, walk in one direction. Sometimes I'll bring the dogs and turn around and walk back. You know, and I'm like, all right, great. Done, did it, excellent. All right. And then the low impact steady state. Let's say you have a program where you train full body 3 days a week. Awesome. By the way, if you are, you can do your low impact steady state on the other 3 days to keep yourself active. And that doesn't include the 10 minutes. So let's say it's an off day where you're doing cardio. Throughout the day, you're going to have those 10-minute bursts, at least one, and then you'll have that 30-minute of low-impact steady state. Now, what about moving up into zone 4, HIIT? That would be HIIT. And HIIT, if you don't know, is high-intensity interval training. And I'm looking at my notes. That's so funny. I put HITT instead of HIIT. So these are short, intense efforts of some kind of movement. It doesn't have to be high impact. It can be low impact, high impact. You can do it on different pieces of cardio equipment. They're very short bursts. A great example of this might be a short burst of 20 seconds work and 140 seconds active recovery, which would be like walking or slow riding on your bike. Just walking around, whatever, walking the treadmill. So in essence, what I'm saying is every 2 minutes, you do a very hard sprint of sorts, some kind of sprint for 20 seconds, and you go every 2 minutes. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it, it depends on how quickly you can get your heart rate down. Another way to do it is 15 seconds of very hard work, followed by a 45-second recovery. And again, it depends on what you're doing. You know, if I'm sprinting all out max on the treadmill, first of all, that's pretty tricky because the turnover, you can't just start at your max speed. So I actually don't recommend people even using the treadmill for these things. But let's just say even you're doing it on an elliptical or some kind of a self-propelled bike, you know, an upright bike, a spin bike, an airdyne bike. and you're going 15 seconds hard, 45 seconds rest. It's actually good to be able to watch your heart rate because you want to get that heart rate before you start the next interval back down into zone 2. And how quickly you can get back down into that zone is an indication of how fit you are aerobically. So, and what your endurance capacity is. So that's a lot of times what I will have people do is on their off days, I'll have them do their HIIT, and it might be like that 15 seconds worth, 45 seconds rest for somewhere between 10 and 15 rounds, or the 20 seconds work and a minute 40 rest is a nice way to start if you're new to it. And we might start with just 8 rounds and then work up as time goes on because it can be overwhelming. We might even start with just 5 rounds. So, and then when you're done with that, you would do the 30 minutes of low impact steady state. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think a lot of people get frustrated with not getting results, you know, and if they think they're doing their program, they're working out, maybe they're twice a week with a trainer and they don't get a third day in that week. And it can be frustrating not to get results. And also, you do always still need to train your heart, right? It's called cardio for a reason, right? We want to have cardiovascular fitness so that we can live longer better. Living longer is great, but we want to live longer better. So what I like to say is we want to die old as young as possible. Does that make sense? I love that statement. So basically, you want to live long and well and die fast. So this is just something I really think needs to be put out there so that people know there needs to be work done beyond your gym sessions, whether you're doing them with a trainer or by yourself or whatever it is you're doing, you know, whatever it is. It's, of course, very, very important to be strong as we age. And we've talked about that because of the natural muscle loss. We need to really work on our strength. But we also need to work on our cardiovascular capacity. And I think at different times over different eras, you know, the pendulum switches back and forth, you know, between going crazy on cardio and going crazy on just lifting weights, when in reality, we need to have a balance between both. So you don't want to only lift weights and you don't want to only do cardio. And you also don't want to only do things like, although they're wonderful and I would not omit them, you don't want to only do things like yoga or mobility training or breath work. I know we got to do all of it, and I know that seems like a lot, but we have such sedentary lifestyles, at least here in the Western world, that it's a requirement for us to have a good quality of life to do all of this. And so I wanted to put that out there, especially the cardio zones, because we don't really want to be active couch potatoes. And I think it's very easy to fall into that category. As much as I don't like putting a name on it, it's very easy to fool ourselves and think that we're very active because we went to work out, but then we sat the rest of the day. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I'll put in the show notes how you can reach me, or just contact me by email or send me a message on Instagram. But if you have more specific questions, I would love to talk about that. And have a great and active day, and don't be an active couch potato. All right. I'll see you next time on the Air Hug Community Podcast.